Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Cardscast, not Cardscast recording. This one not live on Twitter, X, Spaces, whatever we were calling it a few weeks ago, mainly so we can put this out there to more people, hoping to get it on YouTube, and maybe even get it on the Cardscast podcast feed, even though it's not an official Cardscast episode. Obviously, just me again, without Glenn, but this time I'm actually joined by BBC Surrey Sport's Thomas Mitchell, whose voice you'll probably be familiar with if you tune into the games on BBC Surrey or even watch the highlights on the official YouTube. He's been covering Woking for about a year now, has a good grasp of the club. So we've grabbed him to talk through the latest goings on, obviously with Michael Doyle and Ben Turner leaving the club after Saturday's defeat to Gateshead. So thank you very much for joining us, Thomas. I did see there was an article on the BBC Sport website which kind of quoted you, which was very cool. But I think the essence of that was the right decision at the right time.
Yeah, without a doubt. I think I credit for the job that Michael did back end of last season. If you look at the last 12 games of last season, Woking were 5th in the form guide. It was a fantastic day on the final day. And I felt there was actually real optimism after that final day. And I thought there could be some momentum to bring to the season. A young manager, the team looking good. But there were some massive losses over the summer. Obviously, no Jane Luca in the team, Kevin Burker, there were massive loan players. Obviously, Curtis Edwards only a short contract and he ended up going to Notts County. So there were, some real losses in that team. Even Ricky Corboa scored a few goals at the back end of last season. So it did feel very, very tough going into the season. But I felt there was some good signings over the summer. My time covering Sutton, Harry Buterman, real talent in their promotion side. Dale Gorman's, Barnet captain for 2 seasons. So there were just some really good players coming in. And obviously Matt Ward, a talented young player, Raheem Conte on loan, Keane Harries in defence, Max Dyche returning. So there's just a few names that I think got me excited that Woking could do something this season. And obviously the first 2 games, they're tough fixtures, Ulster and Gateshead, but I mean, that Gateshead fixture, that was a tough afternoon. Obviously, the Dion Kelly-Evans red card and, Greg Ollie, really, really nasty injury. But those 3 wins did get me optimistic with, of course, just off the top of my head, it was Dagenham, Ebbsfleet, Hartlepool. I was certainly optimistic at that time with those victories. And, I felt the Dagenham game, Ward and Kendall made a huge difference. They brought that into the Ebbsfleet game. And I felt the Hartlepool one was really tough. It was quite fortunate with the 10 men, but that was a great afternoon. But I felt things for me, the signs were there in September with the Oldham and Sutton games, going 2-0 down, both of them after obviously going 2-0 down at Hartlepool, and that was a really concerning sign. And I felt the team they had a lot of possession, but in those matches I can't remember Woking creating really any meaningful chances. And the goals, the Oldham one, Charlie Kendall just scored a rocket out of nowhere. The Tom Lee he had against Sutton, that was one where it just went under the body of the goalkeeper. So for me, there were signs from those 2 home games what was to come. And then I think for me that the big one where things really started to turn was that Tamworth away game. 5 changes were made after. Again, I felt a settled lineup was starting to come. The York game was really good. That was for me probably one of, if not the best performance of the season. And then they beat Slough, and then that Tamworth game, 5 changes made. Again, Michael Doyle said after that one, they had loads of the ball, but gave away silly goals, and they didn't really do anything. The ball that afternoon. I felt that was another concerning one, another real red flag. And there was the Forest Green draw, which was a weird one because Forest Green, obviously top side of the season in the top 3, obviously just come down from the Football League. But I felt the 10 men, they were there to be beaten that day, although they got some quality players and Woking did come from behind. They did show some character. But again, that was another frustrating one. Maybe a game they could have won, but they played well against Cambridge in the FA Cup. So I was thinking going into November, that was a time to get some real results together. And the Boston game was a weird one because it was a win, but it was very, very hard watch. Just a piece of Matt Ward magic, really, to win that one. And again, I was thinking, could some momentum happen? And then the Barnet game happened. That was a real tough afternoon. Obviously, there was a bit of a spat between Dale Gorman and supporters. And I felt the Southend game, they had to win that one. They simply had to win. And that for me really felt like the beginning, the end. 10-man Southend, couldn't find a way to break them down. And then obviously the Oval game happened 4 days after that. Yeovil, obviously Woking down to 10 men themselves that day for a red card. I didn't think that was a red card on for Stretton, but you saw Yeovil manage to break down Woking, so it was really frustrating for the Woking fans that, you know, a few days before they're watching their side struggling to break down Southend, and Yeovil, of course, the top side in the league, but it felt like they did it no problem really. And I agree with Michael Doyle, the effort was really good that day, but again, concern, and even when he down to 10 men, there was no real meaningful chances created. Matt Ward was trying to beat the keeper from halfway, and then there was another long shot from Matt Ward. It was just basically Matt Ward against Yeovil. It felt like an attack that day. So again, that I just felt like after that game, it was the end was coming. And then obviously the last two games that they haven't won, and the Gateshead one. Well, actually, I felt the games before at least Woking were conceded loads of goals, and then that felt like the final nail in the coffin. You know, should have beaten Havant comfortably. They made a mess of that one. Thankfully, got through in penalties. And the Gateshead game on Saturday was, yeah, that was just, it was awful to put it lightly. So, I pretty much summed up the sort of Michael Doyle from August, Michael Doyle's time this season from August to now. But I felt it was the right decision at the right time. Woking outside the relegation zone. Still plenty of time. There's more than half a league season left. So hopefully the club, they've sent their statement. They feel like they can get an efficient appointment pretty swiftly. So let's hope that is the case. Obviously, a lot of fans are wondering at the moment. There was an announcement who would be taking training and possibly take the team against Altrincham. So that would say to me, I don't know anything personally, but that would say to me, I think there's definitely something in the pipeline, hopefully ready to be announced the next day or two. That would be perfect, to be honest.
Yeah, things will hopefully move quite quickly. I think we paid the price for not doing that last year after Sal left, and there was, I think, 6 or 7 games where we seemed to keep losing until we beat Dorking, and then Doyle joined the next day, and then we kind of went from there. But yeah, actually, you mentioned kind of the slide off in results, but I think what my next question was going to be was, do you think that the performances in the last 2 games, obviously we managed to beat Havant, but it kind of went to penalties. We conceded 3, we could have lost that game as well, and then just getting absolutely smashed against Gateshead. Do you think that kind of the performances would have been one of the key factors as well for the board when they were looking at making this decision of the last couple of games?
Yeah, I think so. I think the team just looked, again, so open at the back. And I think one thing I will say about Michael Doyle's side, they certainly lack quality, and you could certainly criticise the style of play, the frequent lineup changes. But I felt like they never lost by many goals usually. And I think that Gateshead game just said, Gateshead again, a top side in the league. But I really felt like just Woking just folded that day, and again in that game against Havant, just very, very concerning to see what the side of that, Woking's quality over Havant. They should be winning that game comfortably, really. In the position they were in, 3-1 up. Again, it certainly signs are pointing to are the players now really motivated? Are they fighting for the manager anymore? So I certainly think performances from those 2 games in particular were a real indicator. But again, I look at that Southend one I mentioned just a moment ago. That one was the one where I really felt like this is the end. That was one I felt they had to win. And I never felt like when Southend went down to 10 men that Woking were going to score, which is very concerning. Obviously, that Dion Moore had a massive chance to win the game. Off the top of my head, I think it was a header. But overall, there weren't an abundance of chances created that night. So again, not just the last 2 games, but you could point to that Southend game, the Barnet game. I felt like I watched the same game as I did last season under Darren Saul. Exact same result. Conceding an early second half goal, not really a response in that one. That was again another pretty tough watch. You could say likes of Barnet, Gateshead, top sides, but Woking still should be doing better. Still should be putting more of a fight against these sort of teams. I do feel that there is a good team there. I think that this team is certainly better than 19th in the table. I'm not saying it certainly has a divine right to be competing for playoffs, even divine right to be sort of lower end of the top half, but certainly to be, I don't know, 14th, 16th, away from that relegation fight, I certainly think that the Woking squad is more than capable of being in that sort of position.
Yeah, and you alluded to some of the challenges earlier when you were kind of giving an overview of the first half of the season, and well, actually the stuff that basically started over the summer as well, with a lot of key players leaving. Obviously, after the game last Tuesday in the trophy against Havant, Ben Turner gave quite a passionate defence. I know I don't think you were covering the game. I think Gary Smith covered that one, but it was quite a comprehensive kind of defence from him on why he thinks they need to be given more time and why kind of everything was against them. And I guess that kind of happens in football. But yeah, I guess when you saw that at the time, did you think that kind of the writing might be even closer to being on the wall if it wasn't already? It kind of sounded like a management team that was really under pressure. And actually also I guess from your point of view, we hadn't really seen many of those interviews. I think Turner's done a couple this season, but mainly we get kind of Doyle side of things, which are kind of a lot more measured, maybe is the best way to put it. So was it kind of a surprise to you to see kind of Turner come out swinging?
I'd say a little bit, but I think I interviewed Ben Turner once against Barnet last season. He does seem that sort of character, and again, they have their right to give their side of things. And it, as you said there, it did feel like a management team under serious pressure, and I think they knew exactly how lucky they were to get through that FA Trophy tie. But I sympathise. It was a very tough summer, ownership uncertainty. Again, the budget cuts, which he mentioned, and again, the key players and the real good form of last season leaving. But overall, as I said, I do think this side should be better than where they are when they're on the table. And 2 wins in 70 league games, that just says it all. So, but from Ben Turner's perspective, I can understand the pressure they're under. Obviously, Michael Doyle can be a little bit more reserved. But even listen to Michael Doyle's interview. I think it was Bernard Chizzy covered that one for BBC Surrey on Saturday. Michael Doyle gave a bit of a passionate defence. He felt he was getting the stick he's getting from the fans was a bit overboard, and I can understand. Obviously, it is very, very hard to hear that in his position. But I think the average Woking fan, they just want to see their team do well, and they have the right to their opinion. I think the average Woking fan, from what I've seen in the reaction to Michael Doyle's sacking, they like him as a guy. He comes across very well, and from when I've interviewed him, he's a very, very classy bloke, and I certainly wish him well for the future. But overall, I think it is the right decision to get rid of Michael Doyle and Ben Turner. Again, I have no doubt they gave it their all. You can certainly tell they're feeling the pressure at the end, but I think it's not just the best for the club. I think it's the best for them as well. I'm sure, actually, as managers, as people, they'll really grow from the experience. They've had the highs, they've had the lows. They've seen how tough it can be to be a manager and a coach of a football club. So I think they'll be better off for this, and hopefully Woking better off this as well.
Yeah, certainly a baptism of fire coming into this role, but I guess that's kind of what happens when you're not really in management and you're looking to kind of make that step across. You're not always going to get the perfect appointment, and they'll probably learn from it. And it'd be interesting to see what they do next. When the dust has settled, what do you think will kind of be their biggest regret from the management team of how things went and maybe some decisions they made this season?
Interesting. I'm actually looking at. I did a look at the lineups, and this season, I think not finding a settled team was a big issue for me. There was 12 different defensive back lines, either a back three or a back four. There was 14 different midfield combinations. I understand a lot happens in the season. We've had 25 games, so you are going to get a fair few combinations, but even then, that they are huge numbers. So that was worrying, and I think not finding a strike partnership that worked. Again, they had 5 different strike partnerships, and none lasted more than 2 games together. So that was another concern. I think Dion Moore had the longest run of games as the striker, and that was only 4 games, stretching from I think it was a Solihull game to Halifax one. Again, the lineups were only unchanged twice. It just shows it was very sporadic. And again, there would have been injuries, there would have been suspension. Of course, things do need to be changed sometimes in lineups, but I just felt their biggest regrets in my opinion, would certainly be tinkering the lineup too much. Nothing ever felt settled in the team, and there've been 3 or more changes in the lineups on 17 occasions out the 25 games this season. So again, I think those stats just say, that would be a massive one for me. Just a really unsettled team.
And obviously, we've talked about what they might be up to next and kind of how they can learn from it. But what do you think, kind of obviously the new ownership, gradually coming into the club? Obviously, a lot of appointments made this month, kind of both on and off the pitch. But what do you think it is they'll be looking for in a new manager? Because I guess there's always the certain kind of paths that you go down, whoever you pick. This time we went for kind of inexperienced, but untapped potential maybe in the management team coming out of an academy. New non-league, these kind of things, rather than going for someone that was more experienced. Kind of what path do you think the new ownership will want to go down? I guess nobody knows because we've not heard much from them, but what do you think your sense is of where they might go with this?
Here's an interesting one, because I haven't heard much of them, but I personally think it would be huge risk to go for an appointment that is a manager that's not proven. So I personally think someone with experience would be massive. I've seen names like Matt Gray, for example, being mentioned a lot amongst the fans. And Matt Gray, someone I've dealt with personally when I was covering it, I was commentating at Sutton United. And for me, I've seen firsthand how good he is as a manager. You only have to look at his CV, taking Sutton United up to the Football League for the first time in their history. And funny enough, Woking have been in the same boat. They're desperate to get to the Football League sometime in the future. That would be amazing. They've never been there in the history. So how Matt Gray would love to do that again. I think he'd be someone I'd love to see in the Woking dugout. I think he solidified Sutton so well. There was a clear style of play, the direct wingers, the 2 up front, that Omar Bugil at the time dropping deep. And it was really direct, exciting football to play. So that would be someone I would love to see at Woking. Obviously, I again haven't heard anything in terms of in particular names from the club. They're very obviously tight-lipped about it. But yeah, if you had to ask me who would be great for the job, I think someone like Matt Gray would be fantastic. Neil Lally, someone I've seen mentioned as well. Again, someone really good experience in league. Solihull, Notts County, obviously had a long time at Wimbledon as well. So I certainly don't think he'd be a bad shout. Obviously, the red flag would be the time at York didn't go too well on a really big budget there, left them a point above the relegation zone last season. But again, these things happen in management careers. Overall, though, I think he's someone who knows leagues, quite local to the area as well. So that wouldn't be bad. I think I definitely think an experienced manager is what Woking need right now. Again, obviously, the best man for the job, there could be a really good young manager out there who could really improve the side. But yeah, I personally think they need to go quite safe for this one, and someone who knows the league pretty well. But I think it's still quite relatively young in the management game as well, and still has quite a lot of years ahead of them.
Yeah, that's always the thing. I always come back to this point: is that you either appoint someone. There's always going to be you can always pick on some kind of red flag, can't you? I think because unless you're Wrexham or someone who's like, well, we're millionaires and non-league, come to us, then you could attract someone that's got a kind of flawless record or these kind of things. But there's always going to be something. If someone has experience, that means they probably failed somewhere in this league or somewhere else. If they're inexperienced, whether they're coming from academies, or they're coming from lower leagues, then obviously you've got that against them as well. Well, they don't know the level and stuff like that. So yeah, it's always a little bit tricky, but that's kind of why someone like Gray would probably be quite a good option. Because I think the only failure really was that last season at Sutton, when there were kind of reasons around that. But I guess in your kind of to kind of round this off, your point of view would be that fingers crossed for Woking fans listening, there's exciting times to come with the new ownership. Appointments being made, as I say, off the field, director of football, kind of coaching staff, and new players starting to roll in already. Obviously, a new manager will hopefully be here this week. You might be commentating on him kind of come Saturday. So I guess you think it's probably kind of exciting times to come, hopefully.
I think so. And Todd Johnson is someone who has experience being on the board at National League club, which I think is massive. It isn't some random person coming in who doesn't have a clue about football, maybe like some people might think that if they haven't researched him very well. But I think the fans are pretty well informed that he's someone who certainly knows that the National League. And I think there will be really good planning behind the appointment of manager. I don't think they'll just appoint anyone. I think that there will be a really good process, but I think it will be something that they thought about for a while as well. I wouldn't be surprised if they had someone in mind for quite a few weeks. And it's exciting as well that there's a new director of football in Jody Brown. So I'm looking forward to see what his ideas, and I'm sure he'll have a massive say on becomes new manager. So overall, it doesn't really get any more new era than this. New ownership and a new manager to come. So I think it's really exciting times to come, and just a few additions to this side. I think a creative midfielder, maybe another striker, maybe another winger. And I think the side could really fire. There's some good options at the back. There's some good options in centre midfield, and they can just be a settled formation, settled lineup. I just certainly sort the away form out. That's, again, I know it's very, very tough. There's some real top sides in this league, but 5 defeats on the spin away from home is certainly a huge concern. Some of the worst away form in the league overall from this season. And again, only Ebbsfleet has scored less goals than Woking. So hopefully the new manager can get the team scoring some goals and having some exciting attacking play. And hopefully there will be some good times to come. I think in the short term as well, some really good fixtures coming up. Obviously, Aldershot's always a massive game, but in particularly both sides right near the bottom on Boxing Day as well. That's going to be a real cracker of a fixture. And then Maynard on New Year's Day. Their sides around Woking, so hopefully there'll be a new man in then, and there could be a real good bounce and get some massive results. And if they can get through in the trophy as well and get into a solid league position, this second half of the season could be a really good one for Woking.
Well, that was great to have Thomas with us on the recordings to get his thoughts on what's going on. Obviously sees a lot of the football, really well informed, spoke really well about the situation that's been going on at the moment. Obviously crazy times, a really busy month with everything going on at the club. So definitely try and get Thomas back on again in the future. Was good to chat with him. But we just wanted to spend some time following that, kind of looking through some of the questions we've been sent in by kind of people on Twitter, X as it's called these days, running through some of those questions and other points around a busy week of everything going on. So one of the first questions we got in from Sam Fisher, he asked, do we need to be realistic with who we might be able to get in as manager? And that's a really good question. I think you see some of the names being thrown around out there, kind of assuming that everyone's definitely going to be waiting for Woking to come along and scoop them up. But it's a tricky sell, I think, to potential managers out there. Obviously, you've got those that are out of work who we think, might be more open to coming in and working with the club. But they might also be waiting for the right opportunity as well. You even look in kind of the more professional game, someone like Graham Potter waiting an age to go into the right club, but it makes sense rather than going into somewhere where you think you're being set up to fail. So an interesting situation really, because you've got to find someone that's happy with the team. They think that they could keep us up. I'm sure they're potentially going to be able to work with the director of football on a couple of signings, but I think the squad's going to remain pretty similar as we saw towards the end of last season. Obviously we managed to grab in some really key players that ultimately kept us up. Will they be able to do the same this season? Well, hopefully, obviously with the new ownership coming in, that's something they'll be hoping to do. So, if they're happy with the squad and think that they can work with it, even with a few additions, if they kind of think they could work the director of football and have got the space to add those players in, then it could be a really good one. But if they look at it and say, well, we're halfway through the season as of this Saturday, on 21 points as it stands, it's too much of a risk to get involved. So they might be waiting for something else, someone who's higher up the table or another position to come in. So, it's definitely a tricky one. Obviously, we'll never know what's going on in those discussions, but, people saying they're seeing Ardley at some of the games, he'll got a good view of the team, which maybe thought made them think it was a big task on how we've been playing recently. But I think if someone knows this level, then they're going to know the players, and they're going to know, hopefully, that they can get more out of them. Because there's certainly, I think, as Thomas was alluding to in the recording, there's certainly kind of more we can get out of some of these players, and I think some of them probably didn't play that well under Doyle eventually, just because there was probably no real clear plan, or he didn't fancy them, and obviously we saw people like Kendall got kind of being sold because they didn't really get along with Doyle, the system, and what he wanted to do. Well, he never played someone like Kendall, so it's hard to get players like that on side, or get them to have good statistics or contribute to games if you're really giving them not very many chances, and when you are, the system doesn't really complement you. So it'd be interesting to see that, but as always, obviously Woking is a big name, and actually the project, I think, is going to be the most exciting thing here. I think Innie did a interview with BBC Surrey last week, talking about kind of the project. Obviously, he knew Todd Johnson from his time at Dagenham, but talking about this kind of project, and he wanted to be a part of it. So obviously, Innie's had hundreds of clubs, and he's probably used to giving those intro interviews. But all jokes aside, it is good to hear people talk about that, and it's not just, oh well, I'm going to come in and we're just going to maintain what Woking are. It seems like we really kind of want to build out what we're doing, and we do want to go somewhere. So I think that's why, it could be a really exciting second half of the season. And, for a smart manager that thinks, well, I can't do much worse than what's going on right now. The only way is up. And I'm going to get the chance to work with a good squad that's already here, that's better than where it is in the table, and get a few additions. I want to have a crack at it, this season. I'm sure the aim is just to keep us up, and then have a strong summer, kick on next season, and see what we can do. So that'll be a good one. Is it an exciting opportunity? Some believe was the second question from Sam, and I think it is for that reason that we were just talking about there. Just looking back at Doyle, another question from Sam was, do you think part of the problem was the lack of any communication from the club, and that kind of created more of a toxic environment around everything that's happened in the last month or so, where fans have kind of really got fed up with what's going on? And I don't think it is. I think when you're losing games and you're not playing well, and there's weird decisions, and I think people just get fed up, whatever's going on, whoever's in charge, whatever the comms are. And I think if you try and you're doomed if you, however you do it. So if you try and be too positive, people will jump on you. I think our social media has probably been, also the official club social media has been, responsible for that at some points, trying to paint a really positive picture when everyone disagrees. Vice versa. If they're negative about stuff, then it goes the other way. So it is tricky, and I actually think the perfect way to sum it up is the difference between the interviews that Doyle and Turner have done. They were kind of chalk and cheese, and neither worked. I think more people got riled by Turner coming out and just giving a whole interview full of excuses when people don't really agree with a lot of the stuff that's being said in them. There were parts in them, that I think even kind of factually weren't true. I think one of his lines, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think one of his lines was, we went further in the FA Cup this season than we did last season. That's just not true. We went out to a better opposition, but we didn't go further. So trying to claim stuff like it just doesn't work, and trying to kind of passionate and say, well, everything is great, or it's not as bad as it seems. Well, going to some of these games recently, which everyone that's listening to this will have done or watched the highlights of it, it is bad, and you can't hide that. But even if you come out and communicate that, it doesn't really work, and it's difficult for people that run the club as well. Even if we had an ownership structure that came in even sooner, it's a really difficult thing. It gets to the point where you've got to come out and say you back the manager or you don't back the manager. Well, if they came out a month ago and said, yeah, we back Doyle, and then we fire him, it looks kind of chaotic. So it is always a difficult one. Again, I advise anyone that's doing the communications not to just go on Cardsboard and kind of fire off stuff on there. It doesn't really work. But hopefully, with the new ownership, we do get more kind of communication. It was good to see Joe, the director of football, kind of putting out a couple of tweets about what he's up to, even thanking the fans on Saturday for what I'm sure was a really disappointing trip all the way up to Gateshead. To see that performance, it's good that those kind of communications go on. They're very small things. but I think they do mean a lot. But even looking at, look at the replies to that tweet, people are jumping on it, sack the manager, do this, do that. Some people appreciate it, but it's hard with these communications, whatever you do. One of the other things that we were looking into was kind of the people that would benefit, players that would benefit, I think, off of the change in management. Again, if Kendall would have stayed an extra week, I think he probably would have benefited, and I was hoping that would be the case. But then obviously, the transfer happened, and we do need to make transfers. That's an unfortunate reality, probably, of where we're at. The squad is bloated, and I think it's going to be really, really difficult to move some of these players on. Obviously, they're in full-time football, and I think if they drop down, which they're going to have to, some of the players we want to move on, they're certainly not going to be going upwards in this league or any other league. They're probably going to have to drop down to part-time, and obviously that causes a lot of problems. Why would you drop out of a full-time contract if you've been given one? I guess the good example is Moore, only having a deal up until halfway through the season or to the new year, and the club have said they're not going to renew that, so that's good to see. But obviously we do need to move some of these players on, if we are going to sign other players, because similar to previous seasons, you end up with like 40 players in a season or something crazy, and it just isn't good. It just doesn't work. It's a waste of money. You're paying players that aren't even in the squad. They're not even turning up on match days, probably because they don't need to be, because they're not involved, and it's just a waste of money. So if you can get a player gone, get some money in the bank, and then also maybe look at some new options when a new manager comes in, then that'll be the way. And best of luck to Kendall. Adam sent in a question and actually mentioned for the new manager that getting Rowe and Ince back in the side would be a great thing for them to do. Yeah, as and when he's fit. But interestingly, for anyone that wasn't there, because there was barely anyone there, a very low crowd for the trophy game. But Rowan Ince was warming up. He was on the bench. He was warming up, and then came very close to coming on. Kind of got prepared to come on, had taken his jumper, his bib off, whatever. And then for whatever reason they didn't bring him on. So it does look like he's close. And I think a player that is probably on one of the bigger salaries in the squad. And obviously we've seen when he's playing well. He's a really crucial player. So even when you look beyond people like Ince, people like Gorman's clearly not been happy this season. Those frustrations boiled over away at Barnet. So I think there's a player there that if in the right team, can do really well. Obviously, there's a lot on him to stop, some of the discipline issues and picking up bookings all the time, and there's a lot of stuff going on there. But again, he's to me seemed someone very frustrated with Doyle and what was going on there, and I think that kind of relationship broke down to the point where he wasn't really playing much, kind of at the end of his tenure when that came along. So there's another one there, someone like Beautyman as well. Again, a player with loads of experience, and we've seen, when he has got a chance this season, he can be a really crucial player. But I just don't think he's really got the minutes. I don't think we've played a formation that suits him. So again, getting players like that, and players that can get goals. I think he's still one of our top goal scorers across all comps this season. Obviously, got a few goals in the FA Cup. So yeah, players like him, I think could really benefit from any new manager that comes in, and that'll obviously be. I think that's what these managerial changes can do. There's obviously players that are unhappy under certain managers, don't like the tactics, don't like the formations, don't like the fact they're picked, or well, they do like the fact they're probably playing, but if they're dropped, obviously we've got quite a big squad, so not everyone can play. It's really tricky times for the players. So a fresh slate for everyone, across the whole team, and then we can kind of see who earns their place, and I'm sure there'll be a couple of players at least that get a new lease of life and can really contribute to what we're doing. And as we say, on top of that, there might also be some signings that come in to bolster the squad for the second half of the season, because we do need a big push just for safety. At the moment we're just kind of barely out of the bottom four, but it could be as early as Saturday that we drop into there. So you really want to stay above that and start looking up the table. Obviously, it's crazy to say we're looking at the playoffs, but I think we just want to, move into that mid-table or as close to it as possible, and kind of let everyone else fight it out for the relegation spaces. And I guess talking about those signings, another interesting one is obviously Innie coming in. I mean, that seemed like a massive saga that him getting signed. The news that he was signed. Obviously, he was let go by Braintree and then signed for us. People going crazy because he left us. He went to Aldershot. Kind of all of this kind of crazy stuff. A lot of people happy to see him back, or at least happy to get a new goal or a goal scorer back in the side. So we know what he's about, and he scores goals, and that'll be an exciting thing. But it seems a lifetime ago that everyone was going crazy about that, rather than losses and performances and managerial changes, and one manager's gone, and Ben Turner said this, and all of these things that have gone in the last few weeks. Kind of that seems a long time ago now, but promising signs there. Hopefully, it's been a frustrating season for him at Braintree, but hopefully, back at Woking, he can start scoring the goals again, and that would be a real throwback to seasons gone by, having him back again for a third time, which will be interesting. And then that we'll probably see more stuff. It seems that it was only kind of Doyle and Turner that left the club, but obviously the news came out. Must have been 2 or 3 weeks ago now that the transfer of the shares had been agreed at the EGM towards the start of this month. So Cardinal Football Group LLC is what we're looking at, taking over the majority kind of shareholding position at the club. Obviously led by Todd Johnson. Not officially announced yet, but I gather it's still going through the kind of legal ramifications. And we all know that a lot of the stuff that's happened since then has obviously been under his watch. So that was the kind of the appointment of Jody Brown, the director of football. That'd be an interesting appointment to kind of follow, because we've not really had many people in that role before. I think Jeff Chappell's done it, and the Gary Hill, that's certainly one I remember, but it's not something we've typically done. But I think anyone that looked at the way that Darren Saul kind of spent a massive budget, and wasted it, let's be honest, could have done with someone scrutinising his signings a little bit more, and that could be said about any manager. I think if you just chuck them the money and say go on, get on with it, that's fine, but then you can end up in a position where you've either got players that some red flags haven't been picked up or they've been ignored, or you can just get a team that's full of players that only want to play for one manager. We have a little bit of that, I guess, with the change of management now. There's certainly some players that seem really loyal to Doyle and Turner. That's probably the only reason they signed for the club. So it'd be interesting to see what they kind of do moving forwards. But yeah, I think we'll probably see less of those kind of signings in the future, and I think that makes a lot of sense. I don't think you can keep just signing people that are close to the manager, because again, I don't think it's necessarily very good for the team. That can cause kind of splits in the camp and stuff like that. Kind of those that are loyal to the manager, those that aren't. What happens when the manager goes? The aside to that is we did see a lot of players that even were quite loyal to someone like Douse, but then when he left, they kind of kicked on as well, and then got on quite well with Sal, and then played a big role. Someone like Casey was certainly one of those. So we'll see what happens there. Craig McCall-Smith joining as head of performance. Not seen anything that he's disappeared. Obviously, that would be bizarre if he joined one week and left the next because the management team went. But interesting to see the setup of that. So the kind of quotes on the official website were from Doyle saying about the appointment, but then obviously Doyle was gone kind of a week later. If that, it was actually less than a week. So a pretty wild one, but I assume he's going to be staying around, although he has been at the club longer than it kind of suggested here. I think for anyone with an eagle eye would have noticed he's been on the website for at least a few months now, kind of as part of the management setup, coaching setup. But now his kind of official title, I think, is head of performance, which I don't think it was before. I don't think it was listed as that on the website. So, in fairness, he might have transitioned to a new role. Connor Croft appointed as data analyst and opposition scouting intern. Again, I think he had been around for a little while now. I'm sure these are people that will be potentially working with any kind of new management team. And again, just kind of off-field appointments. I think we needed. I think we really scaled back on that stuff, obviously, when the money started to dry up from kind of the previous regime. So be interested to see what happens there. And then, obviously, we're already talking about Innie, but Frank Vincent as well, another player kind of coming in. that we'll see. So again, when we had the last one of these chats, when it was over on X in Spaces, I think one of the key things was it's going to be an exciting time, and a time to look forward to. That was just after we beat Boston, and results-wise, things haven't really got any better since then. So certainly not on the pitch at the moment, but now with everything starting to fall into place, it does feel like that we can certainly look forward to whatever comes next. And yeah, I think the early signs are kind of making appointments all around the club. I think it's a good thing to do. I think we've kind of paid the price for not having people in, and having these. Any additional people in to help, I think, are going to be beneficial, whether that's off the pitch, whether that's on the pitch, whatever. It's time to get it right. So exciting. We'll see who the manager is. I'm not, there's loads of debates about the route we want to go down for the new manager. As we alluded to in the interview with Thomas, I think you can point out flaws in any manager, so it is tricky. Maybe someone like Gray, you want to say, well, the only, kind of marks against his name were, maybe not his fault, or whatever. He was certainly kind of got a team promoted out of this league, and then did okay in the early stages of being in the football league. So I think that's a really great thing. Better than having a manager that's been at this level for a long time and failed, kind of numerously with similar budgets. Kind of you're looking across some of the managers where it's just like they've kind of done it with several clubs but never actually got them promoted. Maybe they've got them in the playoffs and they've lost, or they've not even reached those heights. McMahon, I think, is probably one of those where there was good money at Dagenham, and I don't think he really kind of allowed them to reach their potential with that. So again, I think something like that would be a backward step. But now is probably not the time for risks. I think if I was coming in now, looking at kind of how we've done things with the last appointment, I think that was a big risk. Obviously, you go back and you read the quotes from, the ownership at the time saying, we've been bold, we've been taking risks, or whatever the actual wording was, and look where we are. I think exactly a year later to the day, the 17th of December, when we were recording this, that's kind of when Doyle and Turner were announced, and it certainly didn't turn out to be quite what they expected, even though obviously they did keep us up. So it'll be interesting to see what route we go down. I think that was kind of not something we were expecting at the time. Obviously, there were a lot of similar names being thrown around then, and obviously we went down that path. So that goes back to, I think, Sam's question. When we first started talking about that, is it an attractive role? We don't know who was asked last time and who turned stuff down, or who we turned down. There's always kind of rumours on those kind of things, but nothing certain there. So we'll see. But it's exciting. I think whatever happens, we need them in place as soon as possible, and hopefully that can be as soon as this coming weekend. A really tricky game, and then obviously into the Aldershot game. So that kind of need to get in as soon as possible and start work, and get us moving in the right direction, because we certainly need it. But I think one of the things that Thomas mentioned in the official statement, a caretaker wasn't named, or kind of who's going to be looking after stuff, training and on match days. So I assume the club will probably hoping to have someone in by the time we go into this weekend, but maybe that'll change. Everything doesn't always go to plan, and it might be that we need a caretaker for this coming weekend. There's enough experienced players in the squad, but also, as we talked about, Craig McHale-Smith coming in. Well, he's got coaching experience, and there's no reason that he couldn't step in and do some coaching for this weekend's game. So we'll see what happens. Some big games to come. And fingers crossed, we start to move in the right direction. But that's everything for now. We'll look at doing something when the new manager's been announced, and maybe we'll do something with the new ownership as well, as and when they're kind of ready to do some content with us, hopefully, and that goes for some of the other people at the club. The great thing about having new people in positions at the club is, they can, there's more people to talk to. It'd be interesting to kind of find out what they're up to and what their aims are, and where they're looking to take us. That goes for whether it's coaches or off the field staff. So something we can all look forward to. Hopefully, we can bring you more of these in the future. As I mentioned at the top, hopefully we can get this on YouTube and maybe even on the podcast channel. We'll try and get it on X as well. I think you could upload stuff directly these days. But again, we will see how it goes. But thank you for listening for now, and we will see you soon.